I love the freedom that they kind of represent. I think a lot of my friends now in my generation don't have their driving licenses. They don't have to drive. They get given the opportunity to travel and to move around so easily in London that they don't really feel the need. But when you're living out in the countryside, it is the thing that kind of gives you that first taste of true freedom to be able to go and do what you want. I was lucky enough to have a dad who supported not the only idea of cars, but also the idea of being able to go and do what you want. And he kind of helped instill more than just that in me, more than just that desire to drive for the sake of freedom and to be able to go and do what you want, but also the idea of going fast and racing in that competitive spirit that kind of comes with being on a track, not just on a road. And I really found that as I grew up and spent more and more time around the events that were here, it kind of became an inevitability almost. So even though I do love cars, I think that there was never any chance of me not liking them.
It's pretty cool, isn't it, when your dad owns a motor circuit?
Yeah, it makes it a lot easier to get your racing license, that's for sure. I'm competitive in some things, but not so much in others. I mean, when I'm racing, I'm certainly, well, I guess it depends where I'm racing. I try and not be too competitive when I'm at Goodwood, because it's much easier for me to embarrass myself than it is to impress anyone. And I'd much rather enjoy myself, have a good race, return whoever's been generous enough to lend their car to me in the first place, car in one piece, rather than try and impress anyone or try and win the race, when it's much better for me to enjoy myself and not end up on the lawn. So I don't think I'm as talented as my great-grandfather Freddie was, but he was obviously not only an incredible driver, but incredible engineer, and he really just understood the mechanics and the spirit behind the automotive world and the cars and planes that he built. I think I've been very fortunate to drive since I was very young, and Dad's always encouraged me to drive the weird and wonderful things. So I've been rallying, I've been on circuits, I've done hill climbs, I've done lots of weird things in lots of weird cars, and that's given me a great opportunity to be able to learn. So I don't necessarily know if there's much talent there, but I've definitely been given the opportunity to drive from a very young age. Yeah, I think that the future of the automotive industry and the way the environmental movement is going, it's inevitable it's going to change to some extent. And I think that already the Festival Speed is the leading festival of its type for bringing new technology, new ways of moving to the forefront and to show them to people. And we obviously have a huge number of electric and hydrogen cars that drive here. I think that the Festival Speed is very important for that, and important for bringing that sort of technology to the world, and to helping everyone see exactly how they can live in this new world, and what mobility means going forward. I do think though that the vintage car holds a very special place in people's hearts, and the mechanical nature of it and the visceral experience that you have driving it, or even just looking after them, I think what is never going to go. And even if you're not driving on the roads so much, or even if people aren't driving modern cars on the roads, I think that there will always be that love of the vintage car. And I think a good comparison is horses. When the car came along, people stopped riding horses to get to work, but horses didn't suddenly vanish. And I think that just because we're going to stop driving our cars maybe to get to work, people will still love old cars, and they'll still be there. And I think that vintage racing and historic motorsport will potentially even grow as time goes on, because people are so fascinated by these pieces of history. Yeah. So I drive an E-Type at home, and I was just so fortunate to have it. Really, it's a lovely car. It's gunmetal grey with a burgundy interior, and it's exactly what you'd imagine it should be. I always you run the risk of getting a bad E-Type, and some of them are horrible to drive, and some of them are great. I was very lucky to have one that's really spectacular, and I drive it as much as I can and have so much fun in it. It really is a great car. Yeah, no, it's extraordinary. The E-Types are the most beautiful cars out there, I think, and they hold a particularly important place, I think, in automotive history as the first attainable supercar that was ever really released, and the first mass manufactured supercar. And so I think for that reason, it kind of holds a special place in the history of the automotive, outside of its just spectacular beauty. Heroes in the automotive world. I mean, yeah, I look back and I've been very fortunate to meet some incredible drivers. I'm not sure could necessarily pick just one. I mean, Sterling obviously comes to mind, given everything that's happened over the last year, and being able to meet him and watch him race was an incredible opportunity and experience for me. Generally speaking, looking back at those old drivers, they do embody something very different to the modern era, and I think that's got to be respected and admired. But equally, I look at the modern drivers and they do something very different, but also very impressive. And I think Lewis Hamilton gets a very bad rep from some people, and I think it's really remarkably unfair. He's one of, if not the greatest driver ever, and certainly of the modern era. And I think it's very narrow-minded of people to try and restrict him just to driving, when actually he's having a huge impact on social change and the world outside of racing, which I think is great that a racing driver can have that ability. He's encouraging huge access to the sport, and he's transcending the sport and speaking to a whole generation that would never have been interested in motorsport or in the problems that he's bringing up as well. So I'm racing the Jerry Marshall Trophy with Ludovic Lindsay, who's a good friend and a great driver. He's very kindly he's very kindly going to drive his Ford Capri with me, which is going to be a great fun. I drove for the first time a couple of weeks ago at Silverstone. It was a bit damp, and the car itself was fantastic. It's a great balance between fast but not totally wild, and it's very controllable. So even though the back starts to go, you can feel it. It gives you a lot of movement and play, but it all feels like it's under control. And equally, it's not like you're driving a short wheelbase or something. You know, if you can have a bit of fun because you're not totally petrified that if you ding it, you're gonna be sent a ginormous bill in the post. So in the Stirling Moss Memorial Trophy, I'm racing an E-Type, and I was meant to race it at the members' meeting last year and the revival last year, but because we had a few technical issues, so I did 1 or 2 laps in qualifying and then didn't get out in the race. But very kindly, the owner has suggested that I might want to jump back in it again this year, so I'm very excited about that as well. Yeah, there are no excuses for me at this point. Well, yeah, maybe I should be fast at Goodwood, but I don't know if I actually am. I've definitely driven them more than I've driven anywhere else, and more than a lot of people have, very fortunately. But I still wouldn't say I'm necessarily quick. Yeah, of course, there are going to be no spectators at Speed Week, which is going to be very different to any other Goodwood event we've done. But I think the drivers will largely be used to it, because if you go to any other historic motor racing event, it's just the teams and the drivers there. It won't necessarily feel like it won't have the glamour of the other Goodwood events, but I think the racing and the shows that are put on the track will be as good, if not better, than anything we've done before. So I'm really excited about that. Yeah. So before I race, I just try and stay as relaxed as possible. Again, I'm not really going out to win. I'm going out to put on a show and to be a part of the event, support my dad, and to kind of just partake and be involved. So I don't get hugely stressed, but it's normally not in the day before, but maybe in the minutes before the checkered flag, when suddenly all that sensible behaviour does start to go a little bit out the window, and you have to kind of keep reminding yourself that you're not there to win, you're there to participate. Because inevitably, when you're in these racing cars and all the engines are growling together on the grid, the adrenaline starts to build, and you do start to get pretty excited. I think if there's no sense of danger, then you do lose a lot of the excitement. both from a participatory point of view and from a spectator perspective. Obviously, there's a very fine line. You don't want to be too dangerous. You don't want people to have seriously injured themselves. But I think it's not necessarily about the danger that it poses to the well-being of the drivers, but more that it should be a hard thing to do. So drivers, it shouldn't be easy for you to go fast and stay on the track. It should be a challenge to race the cars to their max ability. And I think that's what modern racing loses a bit, is it's very easy to race the cars to 95% of, it's the last 5%, of course, is still very, very challenging. But in these old cars, getting 50% out of them, you feel pretty good. And it's a real challenge. So even though you don't necessarily have, I'm not suggesting you should be dangerous, I do think that the idea of challenge and keeping the car on the track to the best of your ability and going as fast as you can, it should be hard, and it should feel exciting for that. If I could have one car in the world, and I'm not talking about modern cars, not talking about useful cars, just any car ever, I think something as iconic as Bluebird. I mean, I know it's totally impractical and I'd never drive it. But if I was going to drive a car, I'd probably get an Audi RS6, which is totally boring and no one wants to hear about. But Bluebird holds this position in the automotive world of just being a spectacular creation. And I think it exemplifies so much the kind of exploratory spirit that comes with racing cars and building fast cars, and back in that mechanical era, the intrepidation of those drivers and mechanics to build something like that was just extraordinary. So I think not to drive or to use or to have or to kind of experience, but just to be able to have and enjoy.